I want to talk a little bit about what cosmology is today, what cosmology used to be and what cosmology is from a historical point of view, from a scientific point of view, and then later try to see what kind of connection this new, modern, very rich, to some extent rigorous and precise cosmology has taught us, and how it can mesh in which way with theology, religions, philosophy, etc. So that's sort of generally the program for this talk. What place for theology or philosophy once we have established a scientific cosmology? What cosmology, and I'm putting the word in quotes because this will require some definition, so we don't use the word cosmology haphazardly and right-left. What kind of cosmology can one draw from the Quran, or what kind of worldview? What constraints and challenges does modern cosmology pose to theology and Islam? That will be sort of an open-ended question that we'll be raising. Okay. What theological cosmology / worldview can be read from the Quran? Now I want to sort of focus a little bit more on the Quran and say, what do we read from it? First of all, let me focus just on this statement here, which I think is a crucial statement, an important idea I want to convey. No science can or should be extracted from the Quran. We are not going to construct a scientific cosmology, and I have struggled in the first 10 minutes to impart the idea that cosmology nowadays is scientific, that we can construct a worldview, and the worldview can be materialistic or theistic, Islamic or Buddhist or whatever. But in any case, any such worldview which is constructed around the scientific cosmology cannot substitute itself to science, cannot claim to be scientific. So we will not try to extract a scientific cosmology from the Quran. We can try to extract certain ideas, certain leitmotifs, certain themes from the Quran which relate to cosmology and which will allow us or help us develop an interpretation of this universe as we now understand it. In particular, we find that the design argument, which also Dr. Ali mentioned earlier, the design argument that what we see is extremely well constructed, is all in harmony, fits together very well, etc., known as the argument from design or design argument. This is ubiquitous in the Islamic tradition and including in the Quran. For example, just to cite a few verses very quickly, if there were gods beside Allah, then verily both the heavens and the earth would be disordered. Glorified be Allah, the Lord of the throne, from all that they ascribe unto Him. He has subjected the sun and the moon to His law. Each one runs its course for a term appointed. So here again, the Quran is emphasizing the idea of orderliness, of harmony, of law-like behavior of all these objects. That is Allah your Lord. So in other words, it's telling you that what you see is a pointer toward Allah. So it's telling you about the sun and the moon and the law and the relations and how they behave, etc. And it tells you that should lead you to understand God, or that is a reflection of how God is. That is Allah your Lord. To Him belongs all dominion, etc., etc. So I'll skip some of these, and as you can see, there are many, many such statements to that effect.
So what do we do about these things? Should we put God, whatever kind of God, before the Big Bang, before when we get to the point we don't know and maybe we will never know? Should we put God over there? Well, but then we have multiverses. Say, for example, even if we find multiverses, should we put God behind the multiverses? Well, but who knows? We may find some uber multiverses before that. In some sense, that's where the problem comes, that we don't know where the end of things is going to be. Because science works at the boundaries of where we don't know. The science, in fact, most of the PhDs, almost all of the PhDs are done on places where we don't know. Because if the answer has already known, you will not get a PhD because they will say, well, this is a boring question. It was answered 10 years ago or 500 years ago. So you always work on questions that we don't know, okay? So is there room for belief in this? Yes. But at the broadest level, the question would be, why is there something instead of nothing? I think we cannot place, from that perspective, God at any place where we simply just don't know. But instead, there is always this broader question of why is there something instead of nothing, why there are laws instead of no laws, and so on and so forth. I actually don't agree, and I'm going to talk about that. I actually don't agree with the fine-tuning argument from that perspective, but I do think this particular statement is actually a matter of faith, one way or the other. If you use materialist philosophy and say, well, right at the beginning, there is nothing, like, that it just happens to be the universe as it is, that is also a matter of faith. If you say that there is something because there is a creator, that is also a matter of faith. I don't think cosmology can inform whether there is a God or not. It comes from your own personal beliefs. Thank you.
So, my name is Fatana and I am studying Actuarial Science. One of the reasons why I came to this program is because I'm a philosophy minor. So basically, I learn more about this stuff because I learned before about philosophy of science and how people are having trouble with explaining science concept without getting too much into religion. So I just want to know, like, how is it that religion will explain the science concept brilliantly without any like misconception and stuff like that. So that's why I came to this program. And even though this talk has not covered so much about religion aspect, but for the most of the part it covers the basic aspect of how science and religion are connected. So I think this is a very good program.
I helped organize and mainly moderated the discussion on Islam and science, and particularly on the topic of creation, Quranic concepts and scientific theories. And this is an excellent sort of event because it encourages interfaith dialogue as well as dialogue between philosophers, scientists, theologians, who can then recognize that despite their differences, they can respectfully disagree and learn from each other about the value of science as well as the richness of religious history.
I think that questioning bit is the central component.
Right.
Whichever way you go, whether you think God is comprehensible or not comprehensible, but both of those answers, it has to come from an intellectual question.
And I agree with you that questioning is a central thing, even just not intellectual growth, but even religious growth in general.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that bit. But I think it's easier to say, oh, okay, well, some of these ideas or some of these questions are very difficult to answer, and we shouldn't attempt to try to answer them and maybe just settle sort of for the answers that we are given in the book, and not sort of drive ourselves over the edge, sort of looking for answers to some of the questions.
Sure, but that is also a question that you have to figure out. That you think that those questions, by thinking about it, are going to drive you to the edge.
Right.
Somebody else may not agree with you, and that is fine too. So I think so it goes back to this thing. It depends upon your individual interpretation.